My name is Rutuja and my roll number is 1801169. So, my topic is the jobless growth in India or the prevailing problem of unemployment in India. The most basic definition of unemployment is the imbalance between supply and demand of unemployment. So, what do you mean by supply of employment? So, whenever a country's GDP grows, we start producing more and more goods and more services are created. These require more labor, and that's how new jobs are created. This boosts the supply side of the economy. Similarly, for the demand side, as the population grows over time, they start demanding more and more jobs. So, whenever there's imbalance between the supply and demand of the employment, we say that there's a problem of employment in our country. If we look back at India's history, we can see that India has been under the colonial rule of the Britishers. During that time, agriculture constituted about 50% of India's GDP and industry about 25% of India's GDP. Now let's look at what happened from 1950s to 1980s. During this period, our GDP was growing at a very slow pace. Our country's GDP was around 3 to 5%, which is very low, and because of which we were not able to generate enough jobs for the people. Similarly, if you look at the demand side, the population kept on increasing, and there were more people who wanted more and more jobs. So there was a huge imbalance between the supply and demand side of the employment. So because of this, we suffered huge level of unemployment in our country. So now let us look what happened post 1980s. After 1980s, we actually surpassed the Hindu growth rate, which was 3.5%. Our country's GDP was 5% in 1980s, 6% in 1990s, and 10% in the 2000s. So clearly, we were experiencing robust rate growth. If you look at the demand side, our population growth rate was actually declining. It reduced from 2.2% to 1.7%. But still, we could not witness any drastic change in the unemployment. So the question is why? Both the conditions were favorable, demand and the supply of the employment was favorable to us, but still we did not experience any drastic change in the unemployment. So the answer for this is that there's a third factor, which is the technology. So if you want to kickstart your economy, there are two ways. First, you can invest in the capital intensive market. Second, you can invest more in the labor intensive market. If your country wants to focus more on the employment side, you should invest more on the labor intensive market. If your aim is to improve the efficiency, you should invest more on the capital intensive market. So the question is, what if you want both? You want to focus more both on the employment as well as the efficiency. In that case, you should create a balance between these two capital intensive and labor intensive markets. So as we can see, there was a huge problem. Even though our country's GDP was growing, our population growth rate was actually declining, still we were not able to generate enough jobs. So where was the problem? If you look back at the Indian history, we can see that during the initial phase of Indian history, we had invested more on the big and heavy industries. According to a report by School of Economics, Bombay, they had actually suggested the government to focus more on the wage products, which are simple consumer goods like shoes, bicycles, etc. These require less capital, they carry low risk, and the return on investment is very high and very quick. As we know, Japan and China actually followed this model. They focused more on the labor intensive markets and the outcome was very clear. The whole world was flooded with their cheap mass produced products. But what did India do? We actually did the exact opposite. In the second 5-year plan, we released a Mahalanobis plan, which was exact opposite of this. According to this plan, we should invest more on big and heavy industries like steel plants, which had really long gestation period and very low employment opportunities. So now let's look at the present scenario. Why are we still experiencing this high level of unemployment? If you look at the initial years, the focus on capital intensive market was by choice. But today it's out of compulsion. The compulsion of globalization. We are in a race to produce best quality, cheapest price products in the market. So what is the solution? Should we alter the global trend, make it into a labor intensive market? Or should we stop being part of the globalization and be a closed economy? Or should we pass on a legislation that the private sector should focus more on the labor intensive market? The answer is not any of these three, because we cannot just simply pass on the legislation or be a closed economy, as this wouldn't help India in any way. So what is the solution? The answer is that the government should identify the labor-intensive manufacturing and services sectors which have huge employment potentials. They should give them easy credit facility, social security, loans, easy clearance, and some support. The examples are the handicraft industry, bamboo industry, footwear industry, leather products, etc. So now these are the industries where you actually need lots of employees. If you look at the SMEs in India, they actually don't have enough infrastructure. They need skilled labor, but they are not provided with that. They are not given enough loan options. India is already doing something in this sector. It has launched the Mudra loan scheme. It has the Stand Up India scheme, and it also gives credit guarantee for the SMEs.